System. We we are based at the University of Denver, and we're a national nonprofit research organization that innovates and advances solutions that makes the civil justice system more just. And I work in a particular focus area, delivery of legal services and the profession. And within that, I oversee two initiatives. One is focused on regulatory reform, where we're rethinking unauthorized practice of law and ethics rules to expand the ecosystem of models and providers of legal services. And then a second initiative that is focused on serving the kind of the middle class portion of the access to justice gap. So that's the work that I do. And just prior to that, relevant to today's conversation, I was a practitioner right out of law school. I practiced on my own. I started my own law firm for a bit, and then I also worked at a small family law firm. So some of my examples might be drawn from that experience. That's it for now.
Great. Thanks so much for being here, Jess. Margie, do you want to go next?
Yeah, great. Thanks so much, Ryan, for having me. I'm really happy to be here today. I am Margie Foley, and I really enjoy helping all lawyers and executive leadership build the careers that they want and achieve the goals that they want. I'm actually the legal talent director at the Office of the Attorney General of the Department of Law for Colorado. Prior to that, I was at a large law firm in the Denver market. I've kind of held all different roles within law firms, but what I really find as my passion is within executive leadership coaching for lawyers and helping them achieve the goals that they want to achieve. So I'm really happy to talk today about how we can use the different tools and help all lawyers attain their goals. So thanks.
Thanks for being here, Margie. And last but not least, Marcy.
Hi, I'm Marcy Fulton. I work at the University of Colorado Law School, where I serve in our Career Development Office as the Assistant Dean for Employer Outreach and Relations. I work with students who are seeking fulfilling career opportunities and kind of helping them to identify their career path. And then our law school really opens up our Career Development Office to alumni at any phase in their career as they seek to make changes. I myself, similar to Jess, practiced prior to my job at the law school. I've been at the law school for 13 years. Prior to that, I spent 9 years working at Patton Boggs, now Squire Patton Boggs, where I did administrative litigation. And fun little fact, Margie was like my law firm mom, my very first year. She ran our professional development team at Patton Boggs when I was a summer associate. So a lot of the tips and tricks I picked up in that very first and very pivotal year come from Margie. So I might be echoing a lot of what she has to say because she's a really good teacher. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks, Marcy. And thanks for the reminder of how small our legal community really is and why it's so important to build these relationships. Okay, so let's get started with sort of an overarching question. And that is, the reason we created this webinar is because we're hearing so much about how we're really at a pivotal moment in our profession. And so, in one word, how would you all describe what a future ready lawyer looks like and why that particular word comes to mind for you? Who wants to go first?
I guess I'll go first. If I had to pick one word, I would pick adaptable.
Oh, that was mine as
That was
well.
yours too.
It was, yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
Well, I was worried we'd all pick the same word, so I actually picked the second word I thought of, which is evergreen. Just somebody who is perpetually relevant, self-renewing, and continuously operational in their careers.
And Justin Margie, why adaptable?
I mean, I think we're just facing a lot of change, both in our professional lives, our personal lives, and it's not change that's just now happening every now and then. It seems like continuous change. And so I think in order to avoid becoming stagnant, stressed, burned out, probably a long list of not great things, I think if you can really develop the skill of being adaptable and becoming comfortable with that, I think that's just going to really help you out.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, Jess, because when I look at adaptability is like it's a mindset. And kind of what Marcy's saying too about being evergreen is, having a mindset, if you shift that kind of perspective that you're looking at the world in, it's going to help you. You're not going to have so much resistance in moving through the world and through all this change. I mean, we've had a lot of change in the past, ever since COVID, but over the practice of law since when I started, I forgot to mention I was a practicing attorney when I started out. And I mean, at that time, we did not have computers on our desks. So that goes to show you like where we're not looking at our own emails. We were communicating by phone or by actual snail mail. And so the idea that things are really changing, especially with the new in the AI world and kind of what's expected of attorneys in any kind of practice, that means that not having so much friction and having that adaptability is really, if you embrace that mindset, you're going to find it much easier to kind of get through these quick iterations that we're seeing.
And Marcy, how do you see Evergreen as being different from adaptability? What's the additional sort of skill set there?
I mean, I don't know that there is much of an additional skill set. I mean, I think the more change we see, the more people have to roll with that change and be able to adapt to it. And so I think that idea though of being evergreen is just really, you never want to get stagnant in what you're doing, and it's kind of always this movement forwards or movement. Sometimes it's a movement to the side, and I think it's interesting. All three of us are no longer in practice. I mean, maybe for some of you, the path to your future might be something that's outside of practice. And a piece of that, like none of us just jumped out of practice willy-nilly. Each of us kind of made plans to get there. So I think that flexibility, that adaptability, that resiliency is something that all of us are kind of looking for and need to be able to feed on to create the futures we want for ourselves.
And what I like about Evergreen too is I think it retains some of the old while moving into the new, which I think is also a really important concept that we'll be talking about today. So I like the combination of adaptability and Evergreen because we have to be agile and nimble, but we also don't want to lose everything from where the professions come from. So thinking about those two words as sort of our guiding principles, then what is the single skill gap that you see across the profession that worries you most right now?
Mm.
I'll jump in. So I think the biggest gap that I would suggest people to focus on would be relationship fluency, like the ability to build trust and connection and credibility with intention. So I'll leave it at that. Maybe other people have other ideas too.
I think that's a really good one. I actually had mindsets written down as mine, go along with what you were saying previously, Margie. And it could be a wide variety of mindsets, but I found, and this is something I really learned more about, I would say still more recently, a little bit before COVID. And then because I lived in Chicago during COVID, I had endless amounts of time to read, and because there was literally nothing else to do for like 2 years. But really took a deep dive into all the different types of mindsets. And I just feel like it's like 90% of life. Like if you can get these mindsets in place, I think it really sets you up for success, both personally and professionally. And so I guess specific to this conversation, the first one that comes to mind is innovation mindset. We've already kind of talked about that to some degree. And I don't think, again, this isn't something that I suddenly thought the profession hasn't had. I think it's probably something we've missed for a long time, but something that became on my radar more recently. And, as I've used it and applied it during my life, I try to share that with others too, because I just think it's so important.
And I had a hard time picking a skill and really kind of focused instead on what I see as really a discipline gap. I think as we are moving towards like we're in a world where technology is growing exponentially. Human adaptability is fairly linear, and so as this growth of possibility increases exponentially, our ability to kind of keep up with that and process what's happening is limited. And so I think it takes really purposeful, strategic, this growth mindset on our part. But I think what happens so many times for lawyers, and that I saw happen so many times with myself, I had partners that wanted things of me. I had attorneys I was supervising and that needed things from me. Certainly, we're all trying to serve our clients. And then we're trying to balance our family and our own fitness and all of these things. And I think so often we spend so much time pouring into others that it becomes really hard to pour into ourselves and particularly to pour into ourselves with this future mindset. And so I kind of thinking about it, and when I was talking about kind of the discipline gap, it's like if you're not a very strong swimmer and you're barely keeping your head above the water, it seems kind of silly to stop and like think about working on your breathing and perfecting your stroke and doing all these things when you are barely surviving. But it is those lawyers or those swimmers who spend that time and build that strong foundation and think purposefully about their growth going forward that I think are most prepared for what lies ahead of them, or who become the strongest swimmers or the strongest lawyers or the strongest business people in this environment.
Those are all fantastic. And I think all of the softer skills that we're not learning in law school, we don't test for that on the bar exam. And I love that all three of you identify that softer skill as, a needed skill and a needed discipline. One second. Excuse me. Well, let's jump into actual skills and the one skill everyone's probably here to talk about, which is AI. And so, a lot of lawyers hear AI fluency and assume they have to become technologists in their practice. But I'm curious from your perspectives, what AI literacy actually looks like in day-to-day legal practice, or what it should look like, and what's the floor that every lawyer really needs to meet at this point in time? And Jess, you want to tackle this first?
Yeah, sure. And I'm smiling because what Marcy was sharing, I feel like I was just talking about in part today with somebody that I supervise. We were both talking about, I was asking her how she uses AI in her work, and we were kind of comparing notes. And I was sharing that I want to use it more, but I haven't. I think what I need to do is be intentional about carving out the time and creating a plan for it. Like I think it probably is just something as simple as that, which is easier said than done. But anyway, yeah, so for me, I'm not currently practicing. I don't supervise anyone who currently practices, but as I was just thinking about it for myself, and this might be an oversimplification, but I kind of approach it like I still approach AI like I would approach, I think, any other, certainly tech tool, but also maybe just tools generally. And for me, it's at a very basic level, it's just understanding the common terminology that's being used. Like, can I understand enough of the terminology to listen to a podcast, to listen to speakers, so that I can actually like engage that information and understand it and move forward? Do I understand the benefits? Maybe not every single benefit. And on the flip side, the risks of potentially using AI or other tools. And I don't, again, think you need to be necessarily expert and identify all of them or even know necessarily how it works, but like a high level understanding of how it works. And again, tying that to the terminology so that, you can use your judgment and your critical thinking skills as you determine whether or not you want to use it. And then once you're using it, kind of analyze the outcomes, that kind of stuff. So that's probably a pretty oversimplified answer, but that's kind of how I was thinking about it for myself and just the others that I supervise and work with here at IALS.
Yeah, so I'll jump in. At the Department of Law, we've actually had a ton of AI training, which has been so helpful. We had a chief innovation officer in Ann Lee, and she has been an amazing leader and an amazing just driving AI. So we've had various speakers come in, also through our work with the National Association for Attorneys General. We actually have lots of programming, and they're all recorded, and it's been hugely valuable. I use AI quite a bit, and I use it. I'm not practicing law here. I do supervise other people. And I actually, a primary part of what I'm doing here is I'm helping other leaders and supervisors be better managers and be better supervisors. So really using AI and is one of those competencies that we're really focusing in on. We haven't actually drafted AI competencies per se for our attorneys, but I will say that, like you just said, Jess, lawyers don't need to become technicians, just like we don't know how Westlaw or other softwares, they do their magic behind the scenes. We don't know how that works, but we have a certain amount of trust in it. So that trust is there. I think in AI, we need to realize that AI is not, it's not safe in the sense of that you can trust the outputs. So what I would say is, like any competency, I might look at, kind of what are the different levels of how someone can be, like maybe somebody like Jess, who's like knows grasps the main concepts, knows what's going on, that it's there, you're beginning some skills development, and then you might actually get to be more in common practice. And that's where I feel like we need to think and educate our lawyers on what is going to be most helpful for them, because there, with that tool comes responsibility. And if you're going to use it, the big thing is you might know how to put in some prompts and get some output, but the test is being able to critically analyze the output and really what are they giving you. And you also have ethical duties as well, to make sure that it is correct. And there's a lot that goes into that. So I think that I can't remember what the original question was, but I think that it's really important. I mean, it's a tool there. I mean, I could talk a little bit about the predictive language model, because we've done that. I mean, that's what AI is a predictive generative language model. It's not really analyzing the law, or it's not analyzing these facts or what they're finding on the internet. What they're doing is they're predicting what the next word would be. And if you want to Google this is something I learned from Anne, which is the model that if you look at Green Eggs and Ham, if you know the story, Dr. Seuss, Green Eggs and Ham, how the large language models really do look at like green eggs and how many times can it predict that the next word is ham. That's essentially what it's doing. And so that's not doing a job as a lawyer. Lawyer jobs I don't believe are going to go away. I think that people should not get fearful. I think this kind of goes to our growth mindset and having kind of an adaptability. That adaptability means that, okay, some skills and some tasks that we do will change, but the job of being a lawyer, of analyzing, of being able to write persuasively, being able to develop relationships with a client and gain trust, those things are not going to go away. So I think that's where I'll stop here, because I know Marcy's probably got a lot of stuff to say too here.
I don't know that I have a lot, but I do think, I think the outputs are vital, but I also, I think with AI, we're really looking right now at a garbage in, garbage out scenario. And so just as all of us, when we had to like learn how to write our Boolean searches, and that was like a real skill to have to write those searches. I think the way we ask AI questions today, the more nuanced and the more kind of directive our input is or our prompt is, the better our output is going to be. And so, I think there's some real skill there. And so learning how to craft good searches and kind of, again, not having it, you're never going to have to code your own AI tool, but understanding where AI really shines and is strong. And some of that is in summarizing information, or in revising a draft for you, or in helping you change tone of something. AI is not going to be good, as Margie said, at kind of asserting legal judgment into things, or at building relationships, or at accuracy in a lot of cases. So I think really kind of getting a sense of what its strengths are, what its downsides are, and then again, how you can use it. And that's where I think it's so interesting hearing Margie talk about how much the AG's office has invested in training people in AI. The law school, I get this question all the time about how we are training students to use AI. And the answer is, it is currently not a standardized approach. Depending on what professors students are exposed to, they are either getting very complex, very high level access to and training in AI, or they're getting nothing and everything in between. And as I talk to friends who are still in practice and talk about how they're using AI, some have never touched it. Some have almost completely turned their practice over to AI. And I think in there, in the middle somewhere, is probably the right answer. I think the other thing too, and something that each of you as practitioners really need to think about, is what are your clients' expectations with respect to how much you are using AI? Like, Are they expecting you to use it to create some efficiencies, which it certainly does? Because there's going to be a point where a client says, listen, I'm not paying that bill where you spent 5 hours doing something or summarizing documents that AI could have chunked out in 15 minutes. And so, I think understanding what its strengths are, what its weaknesses are, and what everyone's expectations around it are is really important.
Mm.
Marcy, I'm gonna chime in here. I think one of the things you mentioned too is that prompt design. Um, it's not magic. It's actually really good analytical and thoughtful lawyering when you're thinking about prompt design. So if you wanted to put in a search in Westlaw or some other platform to find certain information out, you're going to probably want to add facts. And so you want to add jurisdiction. You're going to tell them what format you want the information in. You're going to tell them who's the audience. There's lots of different factors. So you're going to have that prompt design. And then that goes to that efficiency piece. Like you're being more efficient. There are lots of things that AI can do that are going to help you and streamline processes for you, which I think is, really important. We're thinking about the operational side of the law. There's that will give you more time to do different things. However, that testing and as newer lawyers or even as any lawyer, actually, the testing and making sure that you can analyze what the outputs are, your brain is still needed. You still need to develop those analytical skills and being able to discern what is junk and what is not junk, because there are hallucinations which just come about because it's a large language model. I mean, there are going to be hallucinations all the time. So that's why you have to test and check everything that comes out. The other thing I'll say is to Marcy's point about education, what I have seen, I mean, I think that's like with anything, like it's broad, it's a case by case basis on what firms are doing. If you're at a very large firm, a lot of the big firms, in big law, they will have their own closed, actual own large language model for them where they can input their confidential client information and it's going to be closed. Like I'm in a walled garden, so I'm not putting in the highest level of confidential information, but I might be putting in medium level. So we've got a model for like what is confidentiality here for the people, our teams who are working for the state and the people of Colorado. So we've got a model that directs people on what can you put into AI or what can you absolutely not put into AI. So that's actually helpful. But for somebody who is at a smaller firm or a solo practitioner, or just they don't have any other support, you need to be very careful about what's going in for confidentiality purposes. And that's something that you have to learn somewhat by doing research on your own and being adaptable and being evergreen and flexible on the research. The other thing I'll say is we had a speaker come in. He speaks at NAG. He's at Arizona State Law School, and his name is Sean Harrington. Look him up. There actually are a couple of other different legal practice people who have podcasts out there that I've been following that give us help on AI and like how we can actually use it to the best of our abilities, but still keeping that humanness factor and the things that only we as lawyers can do.
That's all, I think, amazing. And I think we could have an entire webinar on just that topic, probably several webinars. But I want to move us forward. And Margie, you mentioned this a few minutes ago around legal operations, because I think legal operations and interdisciplinary work are becoming core competencies in the practice of law. And so I'm wondering if you, Margie, would talk a little bit more about this idea of legal operations and why it's something that every practitioner should be thinking about, whether they're a solo or all the way up into big law. But talk a little bit about that and the competencies around that.
So what I would say is the one thing I learned after practicing law, I was in a very small firm. I clerked for a judge, small firm, went to a larger firm. I learned really early on that I was not a silo or an island. Like anything that I wanted to get to produce, to get out to clients, to get out to other stakeholders, I needed to have help from other people. And I think that's one of those things within big law or a small firm or wherever you are practicing. You have other folks that you need to rely on, if it's an IT person or if it's your assistant. So making sure that you are operationalizing and bringing in other stakeholders into your conversations and how you're going to execute it. So if you write a beautiful brief, but you don't actually get it filed, like there's a problem. So you actually need to be able to understand the perspectives of the other folks with whom you're working and how the legal operations thing is, and a person who's practicing law, like knowing the other aspects of what goes into the work product is not nice to have. Today, it's essential because for you to be a strong team player and get across the finish line, whatever that work product is, you're going to need to bring other people in. If that's a legal assistant or if it's IT, maybe you're working on, you've got litigation support teams and you need help with relativity, which is also get it also in an AI context too, like using AI to like generate your reports and things like that. But really, that's going to be so critical to be a team player. And I think one of those things that we talked about is that humanness side, is that when we're dealing with other human beings in the workforce, we have to make sure that we're treating them with due respect, that they're comfortable, that they understand what it is that you need from them, and that you can then communicate and understand what they need from you to get the job done. And that they are not a transactional component to what you need to get done. Because that is going to future proof and bring that relationship. It will be a deeper relationship and more mutually beneficial relationship in the future.
But if I could, I'd like to just provide, I think, another gloss to legal operations, because I think legal operations also exist. I mean, I think absolutely in a team environment and a collaborative environment, legal operations is very real and present. But I think too, for anyone that operates either as a solo practitioner or just operates a little bit more as an island, which some people's practices lend themselves to that. I think legal operations, no matter what kind of environment you're practicing in, is really a necessary component of the business of practicing law. You know, clients seek excellent attorneys and excellent advice, but I think clients also want, I mean, I think you could almost compartmentalize what I think of as legal operations almost into a subset of client service. Clients want efficiency, they want predictability in their budgeting, they want predictability in when deadlines are going to be met, they want predictability in what's happening in their case, and they want transparency and they want to understand what's going on. And so, to the extent that legal operations principles are applied to either a large firm or a solo practitioner, I think they really help to just complement that excellent legal advice with all the other pieces that a client wants. I think they want the excellent legal operations coupled with the excellent legal advice. And so that's why I think it's such an important part of a practice.
Yeah, I agree with all that. And just to add on to that, there's a lot of talk. I'm sure people have read a lot about how AI may or may not kill the billable hour. We've heard many things over the years that will kill the billable hour. Will this be it? I don't know. I hope it is, because I think the billable hour sucks for a wide variety of reasons. I think it sucks for lawyers. I think it sucks for clients. And if the profession is going to move in that direction, which again, I think is a good thing, I think all of these legal operations, project management, scoping, learning how to price, this is all going to become even more important, and you'll be more incentivized to do it, because if you're moving away from the billable hour, and you're moving to a new model, which perhaps is more focused on the value you provide to clients and not just the time you spend delivering the work to them. Suddenly AI is your friend, because it's no longer working against you. You're going to use it to become more efficient, and that's a good thing, because the value that you're providing to the client can still be relatively the same. You'll have to kind of rethink it, obviously, given how the world is changing. But what it does mean, though, is you can really use those AI tools to become more productive, become more efficient, and that should help your profit margins. But again, that's something I think, those aren't the types of skills that we typically learn in law school. Again, project management, scoping, pricing. there is information out there about how to do these things. And I think they're really fun. But again, if we're going to be shifting as a profession to a new model, legal operations becomes even more important. And as Marcy said, I think this is what clients are going to want. They do want that predictability. They do want you to be using these tools, and this is a great way to provide that type of value to them.
Yeah, I'm gonna chime in again. So I think too, like both of those points are awesome, and I think that clients do want to know that predictability piece, and clients also know that they can shop around who they're going to. And so if you're able to use AI or other things to make those processes efficient, you need to know how AI is going to work. And then you also need to know, like, what are the things that would go into making a process more efficient. So you have to know what the process is, but then also you can create workflows within certain softwares or even within AI to make this all easier, and you're going to be more attractive to clients. And I think that's such a key, and it's essentially also like project management too. So when you think about project management, we don't teach that in law school, and I think there are lots of different ways you can learn about project management. Because you didn't get in law school, but I mean, it's one of those things that you're going to want to know really early on in your career, because if you're working with more senior attorneys, they are going to probably be looking for you. Like I tell a lot of junior attorneys, like one thing that you can be in control of are the details. You may not have the years and years of substantive expertise in this particular niche area, but one thing you can control are details. You can also control process. You can control that predictability piece. And so you can meet the client's needs too.
Well, yeah, I mean, you all sort of touched on this, how important these skills are, and yet we don't teach them. So how do we actually coach lawyers and help them to learn the idea generally of legal operations, and then teach them how to create operations that are efficient, are client, facing or client beneficial, and get at these details if it's not something that law schools are really going to touch on. Where are folks learning how to do this?
I mean, at the law firm side, I can say, and I think here too, like it's, still that like learning by example, having people mentor folks to show, like if you're dealing with like the life cycle of a litigation matter, like we talk first about like, okay, like look at the pleadings, like what's going on, what's in the file, what's the scope of the work, what are the tasks that need to get done, assigning responsibilities. So we'll have like actual workflows and like task list of things like that. And then you kind of, if you have similar work and it's not always scattered, you can create those patterns. But I think through it's through mentoring, and that's also that relationship building. I think it's really interesting that we all kind of come about it from a different angle, and a different perspective on like what it is that we're doing. But in the law firm, it's really about like shadowing other people, making sure that we're giving good examples early on and like how to behave and how to actually do the actual work. And I think here at the AG's office too, like we've got tons of process improvement, and we call them PIs. And so they're process improvements that we institute all over the board, and we've got lots of documentation, so it's very clear on like what the expectation is. I think that's the best we can do, but that's why we have to have relationships and mentoring, and making sure that people understand that like relationship fluency piece, so you can know how am I going to get mentored best.
And before the other two chime in, I just follow up to what you're saying, Margie. Are you seeing that type of a skill be necessary at the leadership level, at the management level, as we are promoting people and progressing them? To be able to mentor that skill, you've got to be able to pass
Yeah.
it down. So you have to have it yourself. Are you seeing that as a core competency in a leadership role now?
Absolutely. I think that being able to train other folks and being able to bring other people along. And that can show up in lots of different ways. I'll tell you about a law firm experience, like creating programs that teach management skills earlier on in someone's career. So not when they're senior associates, but when they're mid-level associates. So they are getting supervisory responsibilities at, in maybe some lower stakes things or in smaller chunks of work that they can actually take that responsibility on. Then also too, making sure that as they grow up, they're getting more and more and greater experience and greater, like higher stakes things. The same thing happens here. Like we've got different designations for attorneys at the AG's office, where we've got AG1, AG2, senior 1, senior 2, and that's that level of sophistication. The sophistication goes up, but also the supervisory responsibilities are part of the competencies. And you're going to find, some firms promote folks to partner, or some organizations give people promotions when they, when they demonstrate those skills, because we know that I think that there's like a parting of folks who can mentor people and train folks and kind of understand that human side of things, which is becoming more and more important in AI age, and folks who maybe are not, who are maybe more on the sidelines, or maybe they don't have those skills, and they might have other great client development skills, but they're not going to eventually be able to build those teams of people beneath them to where they can then grow their practice even more.
That's helpful. Thank you. Jess, Marcy, anything else on this particular topic you want to add?
Yeah, definitely. So if you're a solo attorney, or if you see yourself becoming a solo attorney, one good resource is legal incubator programs. And we are lucky to have a really good one here in Colorado, Legal Entrepreneurs for Justice. Which a big focus of that program, not the only focus, but a big focus is to help lawyers with the business side of law, learning those types of skills. So is it like a 9-week course on it? No, but it will give you, I think, the information and the skills you need to actually do this work in your practice. So that's an option. I think you can do other things, like you can read books. There are resources online. I've somehow stumbled into learning a lot about pricing, so not billing by the hour. In my previous work at the Chicago Bar Foundation, we were very set when we were starting a legal incubator program there that nobody who participated could bill by the hour because it was so bad for clients. And so that led me on a journey to learn all about how to price based on value instead of time. And everything I learned on my own. I read books, I listened to podcasts. So, there's always that route. And I'm trying to think. I was going to say it would be interesting to see law schools pair with business schools to create some of these classes, but I was a business undergrad major, and I don't think I learned about these skills there. So that's just something I've been reflecting on the past 5 minutes. But I think there are a variety of ways that you can actually learn these skills at different levels. It's possible that bar associations offer at least some introductory courses on it. But yeah, if you need more information on that, feel free to reach out. Happy to try to connect you with that.
I also just 2 things I'll add really quick. One, I think as lawyers, we've got a superpower and a kryptonite here. I think our superpower is each of us went into this profession because we had a love of learning and are lifelong learners and are able to pick up diverse subjects. I at one point was my firm's foremost authority on the Marine Mammal Protection Act, something I have no business knowing anything about, but I became a real expert in it. So, I think each of us kind of start from a place of curiosity, and just as Jess was describing, we just kind of wormhole into things. I think that's where our kryptonite is. We don't have unlimited time here. So I think in coaching attorneys to get better at this, I think one thing to really think about, again, is this: what's our prompt? So like, what problems are we trying to solve for ourselves or for our office or for our practice? What does success look like, and who is doing this successfully? What kind of constraints do we have, and what types of resources do we have available, and how do we get this done? And so I think starting with those questions and kind of then asking okay, who's doing this well? Who's writing about this right now? What's something that I can do to just get better at this in 10 minutes a day? I think we can kind of start to build that in, but I think the place where so many of us are starting from, where we're so lucky, is that we just love picking up new things and kind of digging into stuff. So that's, rediscover the joy of the prompt, I guess.
I love that new mantra. Let's shift to the human skills that come with future proofing our practice, and I want to talk specifically about relationship development, which is something AI can't do for us, and at least on its own. And Marcy, I'll start with you on this one. But how do you think about intentional networking as a professional skill? And how has your approach to relationship development and networking evolved as the profession has changed? And what are you telling the law students that you work with about this?
I mean, I think the two most important things I tell law students is number one, they have to find a way to build relationships with people in a way that feels authentic to them. Everybody can sense a phony. Nobody likes to be a phony. And there are some people who just hearing the word networking is like nails on a chalkboard for some people. And quite honestly, I mean, I go to a million different bar association events, meetings, etc. Those are probably my least favorite spaces to be in. I love seeing the people who I know there, but being in a big crowd for me is not where I excel. I really love going to coffee with one person and talking to them and getting a sense of what they're working on and what they're excited about and what they're doing. And it's coffee, but it's also networking and it's relationship building. I think the other thing that I try to remind students of, and sadly, they too don't have the luxury of time in a lot of cases, but it's never too early to start relationship building, and it's never too late to start relationship building either. You can always do it, but I think it is much easier to build a relationship with someone when you want nothing from them. You're not looking for a job, you're not trying to get the promotion, you're not trying to get an endorsement or anything or a client. You're just trying to learn about what they do and what they need and what their life is like. And so I think the earlier you start that and the more intentional you are about just staying in the lives of people who you enjoy being around, I that is the most delightful thing to me. And frankly, I mean, this is very much a like do as I say, not as I do moment, because I spent 9 years not moving from my desk at my firm because I didn't think I had time for it. And when it came time to try to find something else and kind of branch out, my network had gone completely stale. I hadn't reached out to people in years. And so making it move was really, really challenging just because I had let everything stagnate at the expense of one more client call, billing 0.25 more hours. And so I think to the extent that you can carve out time for yourself and look at it as an investment in yourself and in those relationships, I really encourage people to do it. But again, find a way that is fun for you or comfortable for you or feels authentic for you. And just one really quick example, I have a student who he was in a business class with an adjunct professor. The adjunct professor kept talking about bike riding and how much he liked bike riding. And the student was like, God, I hate going to these networking things, but I wonder if this professor would just go bike riding with me. And so sure enough, the student was like, Hey, I'm going for a mountain bike ride this weekend. Would you like to go? The professor said yes. This student and this professor ended up riding together about once a month throughout the course of the school year. And by the end of the year, this student had a job at a very good firm just by virtue of this bike riding relationship. And they talked and they chatted, and it was very natural for the student. And he enjoyed it, and the professor enjoyed it. And most importantly, the professor was able to see this individual in his own skin and not trying to be the guy who could love a cocktail party. So, just find what you do, and I think the relationships follow from there.
100% agree with all of that. I think a lot of people perhaps overthink it. I think at its simplest, it's just being curious about other human beings. It's just wanting a sincere curiosity to learn more about either their personal lives, their professional lives, or both. And it can just be that simple, and it doesn't have to be a big event. I also prefer more one-on-one conversations or smaller conversations. And I think a lot of people too are fearful to ask because they feel like it's a huge burden on the other person. But based on my experience and hearing other people talk about it, I like 95% of the people are gonna say yes. Like they are willing to help out. They are also, a lot of people just like to talk about themselves too, which is great. They just want to share their information. So also just don't have that fear either. And yeah, it can be really, really fun if you really just kind of break it down to that very basic level and you don't necessarily have a goal of maybe getting a job or something like that in mind. Just start really simple. And I think once you do that, you'll find that it just becomes a lot easier and even fun.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Everything you said is spot on. Being authentic and genuine is really the only way you can do it because people can really they can sniff that out if it's not genuine. The other thing too is I think as I've gotten older is older people really like to help younger people. They love that. Just like Jess said, people like to talk about themselves. Ask them any question. I mean, I think if you the one-on-one things are much better for me too. I mean, I don't know a lot of people who really are truly that outgoing that they love like giant networking events because they're really impersonal. And if you are a people person, having more one-on-one conversations are going to be more gratifying and more soul-filling. Um, and you get to be yourself too. So I think be genuine, be yourself. And then like there are some tips and tricks that you can do for afterwards. So like let's say you meet someone or like the professor, or maybe you work with somebody on a matter or on some kind of other thing, and you know follow them on LinkedIn, connect with them. I think the other thing is that having a follow up after a meeting that's genuine, like I cannot stress enough the thank you email. It used to be a thank you note, but now we really don't need to do thank you notes because nobody knows where anybody is. So like physically. So just do a thank you email, but follow up and say thank you, show some gratitude. And then if you're following them on LinkedIn, you can see if they have an article that they've posted, or maybe they write something for Colorado Lawyer, or they have some other study that's come out that you know would be interesting to them. That gives you the entree to send them an email, to have some sort of follow up. And like I think Marcy said, you're not in the position of needing anything from them at that time. It's not that you need something, you need a job, you need a reference, but you're just being a kind person that's showing interest in something that they mentioned to you. So that's where that intentional approach, being intentional about it and genuine, that kind of mixture really works really well. And then, it can be really scary. Like I'm sure Marcy's student was really scared to ask the professor to go ride bikes, but you'd be surprised at how if people they may be able to do it or if they can't do it, but they will find another way to help you. I think that's one of those things too. It is a small legal community and folks do want to support one another and they feel value. There's just this intrinsic value that you have when you can help somebody else um, with getting whatever it is that they need. The other thing is, I'm gonna go back to AI. Like, you don't have to be some kind of genius person that comes up with great small talk. Put it in AI. That's a perfect use for AI. Like, people love like, how did you meet your spouse? How did this come about? Why did you decide this? I mean, once you kind of get a little bit of a tips on like what are those small questions, then it's not nearly as scary to start with like the first one. So
I'm just going to add one thing too to the beginning of the conversation. I think Margie's point about following up is fantastic. At the beginning, like trying to open it up, trying to get it set up, make it easy for the person to say yes. It makes me crazy when a student emails me and says, "Can we meet?" I will never not meet with the student. I will never not meet with somebody in the community. I am a sucker for a meeting. But for God's sake, give me like some bookends. Tell me like, are you available to meet on Friday? I'm free every Friday for the next 10 months, whatever. Like, just give me somewhere to start instead of having to look at the entirety of my calendar and kind of go through there and chunk through. And if you provide 3 or 4 options to the person and they can't make any of those work, they will say that and hopefully will respond with a suggestion. But I hate the blank slate start where it's like, oh God, of course I can meet with you. But just make it a little easier for me to say yes. If you're asking for my time, make it as easy for me as possible. And also, like, offer to meet where the person, and sorry, this is advice I give students, and probably none of you need this, but I'm just going to say it just in case some of you are feeling nervous about making that outreach. Offer to meet the person near where they are. So it's real easy for them to get to. They can just walk down from their office and meet you for coffee or whatever. The easier you make it for them, the more pleasant it'll be for them, and the more favorable that initial interaction will be.
Yeah, I'm really glad you mentioned that because I think some people hesitate to be so direct. That could be seen as like but I think that's so good, and a lot of people really appreciate that. So do that.
Yeah, I just want to reflect a little bit on, where this conversation is today compared to where it was 10 years ago, because I think COVID, to some extent, was the great
Mhm.
humanizer in our profession that allowed us to see one another as human beings and not just as, other professionals. And, when you could see behind people and, oh, you like to fish. Oh, it looks like you're really into hockey. The questions that would come up. And even before we started, Margie was asking Jess about the things behind her, and so we now can have a viewpoint into people's lives that allow us to connect, I think, on a deeper level, which just didn't happen 10 years ago. And I'll use Zoom as a way to be able to get with people in person to say, I've only ever met you on Zoom. Can we meet for coffee? I mean, how many times are we in meetings with people all day long like this, but we've actually never met in person? And it's weird because we develop these relationships online. So that's a great entrance point these days, is to, hey, we've only ever met on Zoom. And then the other thing I just want to say, to Margie's point about AI being helpful in the topics, for the neurodivergent among us, AI is great at helping to scaffold the outreach, helping to scaffold the conversations. There's so much there, and I think has been a real growth opportunity for folks who struggle in that area, to be able to lean on AI as an outreach tool and a connector tool.
Yeah, I have I'm glad you brought up being neurodivergent, or like having differences and diverse abilities, or when we think about interrupting bias. So one of the things that I have worked on for years is creating cultures of feedback. And if you're a junior person and you're craving feedback, and how do you get that feedback? It can be really intimidating. But you've got to take charge and take that under your own, the onus on you, because you need to get that. If your firm or the people you're working with aren't giving that to you, it's going to be hugely impactful. So you're going to need it. But the one thing that I like about thinking about this relationship piece, and why when we work with other people, we're all human beings, is that when we think about the idea that we get to know one another, like Marcy's student and the professor that rode bikes. Once you get to know one another, the stereotypes are broken down. Our biases are interrupted. And what I want to do is really focus on the idea of, like, if I get to know you as a human being, I'm not making any kind of predictive analysis on like what you're like or not like, and it makes our relationships stronger. And then we can actually, I'm more apt to give you feedback because I think of you as the human being that you are, and I'm not putting these other ideas that are not true. They're just, we all come to the world with biases, and we want to interrupt those. And so I think that that's a good thing too, when we think about getting to know people and the value and how rich those relationships can be at work.
Absolutely. Thank you, Margie. All right, we only have a few minutes left, and I wish we had another hour plus because we didn't get to almost half the stuff that I wanted to, but that's okay. So I'll leave us all with this, come back to a broad-based question, but what does the legal profession look like in 2036? And what's one prediction from each of you? Who wants to start?
I hope the billable hour's gone.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hope we do a lot of our work differently. I can't say exactly how. I also want the billable hour to be gone. But I hope we take some of these challenges and really leverage them in a way that puts us all in a position to be doing meaningful work and just feeling valued and happy in our work settings.
I also think too that if in 2036, if the billable hour's gone, and I think about the fact that there are people out there that need assistance. There are people all over the world that they need help if they don't have money to pay a lawyer for a divorce or child custody or domestic violence. I mean, those are the kinds of things that I would hope that we've solved those problems for, getting people the help that they need. And we have a justice system. I want to see it work really well. And I would want to see that we've got help for people who maybe are not, they don't feel like they have access to that.
I love that. I hope we see that too.
Yeah.
That's terrific, Margie.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Well, we're out of time. Unfortunately, thank you to our panelists for being here. I really enjoyed this conversation and I hope we can do it again sometime soon. The CLE number is in the chat. Please grab that before we go. And we'll be back on July 22nd with our next CLE liberal and conservative colleagues, a conversation of differing views on practice. So that should be a really interesting conversation as well. This recording will be available later this afternoon. But thanks so much for joining us. Have a great rest of your day. And thanks again to our panelists. We'll see you next time. Take care, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hi, everyone.